Right, hello and welcome to another episode of Faithcast. Today I have my brother Jamie Gaylard with me. We're just going to hear a little bit about his life. He's going to tell us a little bit about just your age and everything like that, so people can get a sort of a background on you, and then we'll move into your testimony and what you do for God and that now. So, what else, brother?
Well, you've given me free rein, James. Who knows where this is going to go?
Definitely.
Well, we're sitting here. It's Thursday. I think it's the 21st of December. So we're just before Christmas. So we're about to celebrate the birth of Jesus. So I think that's pretty notable. And that's kind of fundamental to our Christian faith is Jesus dying on the cross and rising. But that's an Easter time thing. But it's a Christmas time thing right now, so we're celebrating Jesus' life, which was the beginning of it all. Well, actually, it wasn't the beginning of it all because God had that all sorted out before he created the earth, presumably. But anyway, I drift, which is not unusual.
No.
Well, my journey of faith has been, a long journey because it wasn't a boof. One moment I suddenly became Christian because I realised something fun. But for me, it was a long journey of resisting God initially. I'm avoiding that bit you said, say my age. I'm not really that keen on sharing that.
That's all good.
My wife kindly says I look younger than I am.
Definitely.
But old enough to be no longer working, put it that way. But still young enough to be playing competitive tennis.
Yes.
So I'm very grateful for my fitness. Anyways.
Would you grow up?
Well, I was born in country Victoria, in a little town called Mansfield, which is in the northeast. It's in a man from Snowy River country. It's surrounded by mountains and there's ski resorts nearby, Mount Buller. So I lived there from 0 to 8 years. And curiously, although I didn't grow up in a Christian household, I was sent to Presbyterian Sunday school in Mansfield.
Yes.
I don't know why my parents did that, but my mum's dad was Scottish, so I presume that's where the Presbyterian bit came from. So for some reason I was sent there, even though mum and dad never stepped foot in a church other than for weddings and funerals. So, that was kind of a weird thing, and I didn't really like going, but anyway, they made me. It kind of hurt in the end. But then at age 8, the family moved to Western Victoria, a town called Hamilton, a bit bigger town. And I was still sent to Presbyterian Sunday school, even though mum and dad didn't go. So there was never any talk of Jesus or God or the Bible in my household growing up. So I didn't have any exposure at all rather than Sunday school. But I remember I loved the stories that you would hear, the typical kids' stories you would hear at kids' Sunday school. And the one that always stood out for me was the story of the Good Samaritan. As a small child, that always really struck me as being a great story. Here's this guy that helped someone when other people were ignoring the guy that was injured and hurt. And he had, it just seemed like a wonderful story to a young guy.
Such a sad story, though. Even the priests.
Yeah, the guys that were ignoring this guy that obviously needed help, and there was racial prejudice and all that sort of stuff. So I didn't understand
social prejudice, everything.
Yeah, there was everything there.
All formed into one story.
I didn't get that as a kid.
As a kid, definitely.
But I got that he was this guy that went out of his way to help someone.
Yes.
And that, I don't know, it touched my heart as a young child. So that was something that I got from Sunday school, even though I tried to play possum on a Sunday morning and pretend I was asleep so I wouldn't have to go. But as far as I know, my dad's mum, Grandma Gay, she played organ at Church of England. So she was a churchgoer evidently, but she never spoke to me about church or anything like that. So I gather there's some Christian heritage within our family, but
it just wasn't practicing and active.
And wasn't passed down. But
so how long were you in Hamilton for?
That was from age 8 to age 13. So at the end of year 7, we moved to Melbourne.
Oh, the city, Melbourne.
Yeah, city of Melbourne. So, so I spent most of my years in Melbourne, and that's where I met Andrea. But
What was Andrea doing down there at the time?
well, she was a Sydney girl. She'd moved down for work.
Oh, it's
So we met. We lived in the same block of flats. It's a long story, but anyway, we met, and the night we met, the day after, I'd asked her out via a note slipped under her door.
the good old,
And it was on.
good old fashioned way.
Yeah, it was. I left it, well, in a way, I left it up to God. I was leaving myself open.
Leaving up to faith.
Yeah, even though I wasn't.
Faith you didn't.
I didn't have it that
exist,
way. Yeah, it was funny. So yeah, God provided Andrea, and yeah, we started dating as Daisy. We started dating straight away because we had a mutual friend, and she'd filled each of us in that we were both available and single, and anyway, and we're a little bit older, and so we started dating straight away and got married after 4 seasons. That was something Niv mentioned in her little interview.
Yeah.
That my father said you should know someone for 4 seasons before you marry them. So a friend's mum had told me that years before, and I thought it was good advice. So we got married within a year, and then we had Niv within 2 years. So for viewers, Nivea and Sebastian and Ben are our 3 children.
Yes.
And Seb's the youngest in year 10 next year.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, so I kind of resisted God because I couldn't see how a God that was meant to be loving and gracious could allow such suffering in the world. So when I was a teenager, we were living under the potential threat of nuclear annihilation, and there's been existential threats ever since. Where there's always been something going on in the world.
Biological, whatever.
Whatever. There's been something. Terrorists, climate change, whatever.
What was 2000?
Oh yeah, that's right.
Cyber.
Cyber
warfare.
That's right. Computers are all going to crash when the
banks are going to go bankrupt. Everyone was going to go back to trading. Oh man. Yeah.
Well, it was funny because when you live in the secular world and you don't have a faith, all that's very concerning and worrying. So I'll hint on that now, but go into it a bit more later maybe. So I was thinking, what's with this state of the world? It's just terrible. There's been wars ever since the beginning. I mean, it was Adam's sons that, one murdered the other.
Cain and Abel.
Yeah. So we've been pretty horrible to each other throughout human history. And I was thinking, what's with that? Why would a God create a world where there's, if he can create a world, surely he can make it work so we're nice to each other. But that was a very naive view of Christianity, as I later found out. But I spent years resisting God and questioning his existence and wondering. But when I was young, I used to do a lot of hiking in the Victorian high country and in beautiful places where my mates and I, we used to love sunsets in high places and sunrises, and we'd love waterfalls and just the beautiful sights you see when you're hiking in the Australian bush or the Victorian bush. And
how did that all come about?
Well,
like you're looking at creation going,
exactly.
How look at this beautiful sunset that we hiked 2.5 hours to come and watch. Look how beautiful it is. And
that's precisely it. I didn't twig at the time because there was this creation that was phenomenal, and I did science subjects at school and biology and what have you. So just the variety and the intricacy of the universe and the plants and animals that inhabit this planet, it was just a creation that I couldn't ignore. It was there, and it was just a beautiful creation in contrast to the state of humanity. So
fallen man to God's beautiful created,
which I learned later that God created it all and it was good. And I could see that it was good. It was just phenomenal. The science that describes the way nature is.
And how old were you then, do you think?
Well, I was
18,
in
19, 20s?
in my teens and into uni.
Mm.
And I was just resisting God and couldn't quite click. But I wasn't studying the Bible or anything, and I didn't have any Christian friends that were sort of
Encouraging you
me. Yeah. So I was just struggling, trying to just figure out the world on my own.
Was Andrea a believer when you met her?
Well, kind of. I think she believed in God, but I don't think she quite understood as she does now, because we've done a lot of studies subsequently.
But she grew up with a Catholic background.
Yeah,
so like you're saying, she had that.
She went to a Catholic girls' high school, but her family weren't churchgoers either. But she did have a bit of that Catholic background, and that Catholic theology.
So do you think that sort of engaged you in thinking that way, or you were just already on that road of...
I was already on that road, I think, when I look back on it now. But Andrea had disengaged from the Catholic Church because she had issues around the wealth of the church and the inequity, because they weren't giving more to those in need. And she was a young, strident woman, apparently. I didn't know when she was really young, but it sounds like she was quite a strident, opinionated kind of young girl that didn't appreciate that, a wealthy Catholic church could have all that wealth and property and not sort of share it around a bit more with those in need. So she disengaged from the Catholic Church. But when we met when she was about 27 and I was a bit older. And she was actually studying the Bible with her cousin. And her cousin was a JW, a Jehovah's Witness. So, so when we were dating, I joined them in a couple of their studies. So that sort of got us on our way, even though we now don't adhere to the Jehovah's Witness interpretation of the Bible. They've got some weird things there, but it got us going. And then that was in Melbourne, but soon after we got married, we moved back to Sydney with Andrea's work brought her back, and I was happy to come to Sydney. When I lived in Melbourne, Australia seemed very Sydney-centric, and I was wondering, what's the deal with Sydney? So I was keen to come and live in Sydney and see for myself. But anyway, that's been a great move too. So you can see God at work in funny little ways as I look back. So we moved back to Sydney, and then we lived in Glenwood, and we always had people knocking on our door, like the Jehovah's Witnesses again and the Mormons, and I would chat to them on the doorstep. And in fact, we did another study with the Jehovah's Witnesses for a year, and I drove the guy mad. Asking questions.
I can only imagine.
Oh, yeah, it was crazy time because, my heart hadn't softened, but it was in the process of softening. And, the Mormons knocked on the door, and that's a very unusual, I don't know what you call it, not really a religion. But it just seemed weird to me without knowing. It just seemed weird that there was an alternate Bible they have. So it didn't ring true to me. It seemed a bit wacko. So anyway, but it was all part of our process and journey. And then eventually, I think, that's right, Andrew was doing some consulting work, and one of the guys there invited us to his church, which was over in Balcombe Hills. And we actually attended that church for a while, and it was a Reformed theology. It was biblical. And the guy that the pastor there was very good, but he was very intellectual. And I would be concentrating like mad on his sermons and still not quite understanding it because he was so deep, and because he's a real scholar of Christianity. But again, it was part of our journey and path.
Yes.
And
how old were the kids then?
Pretty young. Like Niv hinted at it in her interview, where she said, when she was young, we were finding our way in Christianity. And that was our first church that we kind of fitted in with. And we went there for a good while, but the church was very small, so there wasn't a lot for Sebastian. And So we actually...
Oh, so Sebastian was born then. So you were there for a little while.
Probably during... Yeah, I can't remember the exact years, but yeah, we were still going. And there wasn't like a active youth, so it didn't really suit Sebastian.
So we'll pause there for a second. So what was life? So this is that sort of, you're still haven't given your heart to God. You're in, like you said, you're in the process. But what was life like for you then? Was it tough? Was it, like you're saying, was it overwhelming because of the world being so chaotic? Like in your own mind as a husband and a leader of your house then, what sort of were the emotions going for you then before being a Christian?
Yeah, well...
Were you a stay-at-home
I was.
dad at that stage?
Well, that was before Sebastian was born, but when Niv and Ben were born, yeah, I was a stay-at-home dad for a good while until they started going to school, primary school. So that was a great experience as well. Yeah, as we were getting more into Christianity and we were involved in this church, I began to understand, and we were doing more Bible study, I began to see that the Bible explained the state of the world better than any science could, because science is full of theories that need a lot of evidence to be proven 100% true. So there's the theory of evolution and all that sort of stuff. But science couldn't explain why man was so fallen.
Corrupt.
Yeah, and it's like we talked about earlier, man's been terrible since the beginning, since the fall. So science couldn't really explain that, but the Bible could. The Bible has a story for it, but also has a message of hope for the future. And so where science couldn't explain the state of the world, a deeper look at the Bible could, and it had more credibility for me than science. So my heart was gradually softening, and to the extent that Andrew and I actually got water baptised at that church.
In Balcombe Hills.
Yeah, in Balcombe Hills. So we were actually baptised. So, but we're still young Christians and hadn't really plumbed the depths of the Bible. And I don't think you ever do. I think you're always learning with the Bible, and learning and growing and spiritually growing. I remember we've had men's nights about spiritual growth. I don't think that ever stops. I think you go, I look at people like Wall in our church, who's been a Christian from grew up in a Christian household, and he's still growing and still studying.
Encourages us.
He's fantastic. So at that church we got baptised, but we did leave that church because it just wasn't working for our family quite. So we did attend another church where I'd taken Niv and Ben to playgroup when they were little. And that church was okay, but we didn't connect with anyone particularly. So we stopped going to that one too. So we were a little bit all at sea for a while. And then, this is where you can really see God at work. When our church, New Life, split into two services because of the growing numbers, Georgia, who is Nivia's best friend, asked her to come to the new service, the 10:30 service, which Nivia did. And at the very same time, Glenn and Beck's daughter, Cora, who's in the same year at Tyndale as Seb, she asked Seb to come to Jam. And it happened to be the last Jam for the year. So Seb went to Jam on the Friday night and Niv went to the new 10:30 service with Georgia, and Niv came back and said, you guys should come to this church. So Andrea came, and she thought it was good and came back to me and said, yeah, you should come along. So I went along, and we've continued ever since. The impressive thing about New Life was that everyone took such an interest in us. So we were connected very quickly, and the church had great processes for connecting new people. And I know we work very hard on connecting new people, and it worked well back then because everyone was coming up to us and saying, oh, hello, you're new, where are you from? And they were interested in us. And we very quick, and back then we were lucky. Brian was the pastor then, and his wife. So Ingrid very quickly got us connected in working in the kitchen, and then of course where we met at Ingrid and Brian's life group, which was every Friday night at their house, and that was fantastic because we obviously met you and Mel, and also Sam and Carol.
Yes.
And we met Sonny, who we were talking about earlier. We met lots of people there, but well, we've continued our relationship, our family's relationship, which has been great. So that was, you joined the church about the same time we did. So we've seen each other growing and growing spiritually and in our knowledge of God. So that was really wonderful. And of course, I think lots of people at church remember Brian, and he had a great way of communicating things. So Brian and Ingrid contributed enormously to our spiritual growth.
And just them as a couple.
Yeah, brilliant.
Was just absolutely God unified, just beautiful to watch them as a couple. You know, it was great. They complemented each other.
They did
well, and the way they served and the way that they engaged people was awesome.
It was a great start for us and your family
with us too,
at the church. Yeah. So, and then we split that life group split, and we went with Sam and Carol, and then they were doing the same thing at their house, and then we split again.
And now we're with
Manny and Vilma. Yeah, so it's been a fantastic journey, and the knowledge and friendships and that we've gained from that. So with my story, we'd got baptized at that previous church, but we still weren't, when I look back, we still weren't like 100% Christian. We were sort of a foot in both doors in a way. But then coming to New Life, it really made a difference for us because we experienced a church family that we haven't experienced before.
Yes.
And that's the way Christianity should be, because we kept on encountering people that demonstrated the fruits of the Spirit. You know, the joy, the love, the patience, the humility and all that sort of stuff. So we've just come on leaps and bounds since we've joined New Life in particular.
Yes.
And it's just been a wonderful journey.
Oh, even like we've talked about before, you know, listening to our children, and like when my wife got to interview Niv, and I've spent a bit of time with them as well. It's just been awesome to see. And then obviously when we had their Christmas lunch here, and Ty and Seb are talking about dinosaurs. So they, it was like they were challenging one another, but also not understanding. And then to hear them not get into a conflict over it because they both couldn't come to a general consensus, they both just agreed, let's just put in a pin in it for now, and we'll both go away and do some bit more research, and we'll come back together. When you hear 11 and 12-year-olds talking like that, it blew my mind, because like we've talked about, when I was 12 and 11, there's no way we were discussing things like that, you know, like from a biblical standpoint or a Jesus standpoint, God standpoint. It was just what the world said was true.
Yeah, what you learn at school.
Yeah.
So that was me, secular world. But life's totally different now.